Hi everyone, today's lesson will be on division of polynomials. Before we can divide polynomials, we have to divide monomials first to understand the gist. So let's look at these three examples here. They're very much similar to multiplying, which we did the other day. So instead of multiplying the coefficients, we're going to divide the coefficients. So 14 divided by 7 will give me 2. And we keep the base, just like in multiplying, except now, instead of adding the exponents, we're going to, you should be saying subtract. So 10 minus 2 is 8. So 2x to the 8th. Okay. Example number 2. 15 divided by 1, really, is 15. X to the 6th and x to the 4th, we can divide those by subtracting the exponents, and we get x squared. Y to the 8th divided by y, or y to the 1st, when we subtract them we get y to the 7th. And last but not least, example number 3. Technically there's a 1 in front here, so we're really doing 1 divided by 7, which is really 1/7. So we can go ahead and write that. And a to the 4th, well, a to the 4th, there's no a's on the bottom. There's an a to the 4th here, but no a's on the bottom here. So we could just leave it. You may write it on the top, since that's where it came from. Or, if you want to, you can write it as 1/7 a to the 4th in the middle. That means the same thing. So you could write it on top, where it came from, or in the middle like that. Now, what's b to the 3rd over here divided by b to the 3rd? Well, you should be saying anything divided by itself is 1. So that means this whole thing divides out to 1. Who thinks it's b? It's actually not, because if we follow the same pattern as before, we keep the base and subtract the exponents. What's 3 minus 3? You should be saying 0, so b to the 0. b to the 0 is very different than b to the 1st. b to the 1st means b. b to the 0 means 1. So make sure you realize these two things are not equal. So let's just reiterate that. b to the 3rd divided by b to the 3rd cancel out, because when you divide them, they give you 1. Alright, so dividing polynomials by monomials right here. So example number 1, it says, what is the quotient when this polynomial is divided by that monomial? Okay, quotient just means to divide. So I'm going to take this 3y squared and divide it by this whole thing. Now this is very simple. You're going to divide them in 3 separate problems. Basically, you're going to take the 6y to the 6th divided by 3y squared, the negative 18y to the 3rd, and then the 12y squared. You're going to take it and divide it into 3 different pieces. So if it makes sense for you, I'll erase this. You could write it like this. You could take each piece and divide it by negative 3y squared. Negative 3y squared each time. And do 3 separate problems. So the first one, 6y to the 6th divided by negative 3y squared. You're going to take the 6 and negative 3 and divide them. You get negative 2. Subtract the powers of the y's and you get 4. Here we have a negative 18 and a negative 3. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. It's a positive 6. Y, because we have 3 minus 2 is 1. And now we have a negative 12 and a negative 3. When you divide those, 2 negatives divide out into a positive 4. And what happens again to these y squareds? Anything divided by itself is 1. Or you could have written it as y to the 0, but y to the 0 still turns into 1 anyway, so it's not necessary to write it. So that would be my final answer right here. Okay, if you prefer not to write it all 3 times, and just like example number 2, write it all as 1, just know that you're dividing each of the 3 pieces. So pause the video, try to see if you can get the same answer that I do for number 2. Okay, your answer for number 2 should be 6xy to the 4th minus 4x to the 5th plus 1. Now let's talk about this plus 1 for a minute. I got that by doing this divided by this. So anything 4xy squared divided by 4xy squared, that whole thing is the same. Anything divided by itself is always 1. So don't forget to put this 1 here. So that's super duper important, okay? All right, why don't you pause the video and see if you can finish 3 through 6, and then I will go through those answers after you hit resume. Okay, here are your answers for 3 through 6. Just a few things to point out. Here in example 4, 2x divided by 2x, make sure you have that 1 there. Here in example number 5, the x squareds will cancel out. So 6 and 2 just make 3 when you divide them. There should be no x there. And in the last example, these b's will cancel when you divide them. So there should be no b there. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next page. If you have any trouble with 3 through 6, please circle them and we'll go over them tomorrow in class. Okay, example number 1 on the back says, does this fraction, when I take 2x to the third plus 15x squared plus 27x plus 5, and I divide it by 2x plus 5, do I get this? Now the directions say use the tabler method to divide the polynomials. You don't have to use the box method, that's what the tabler method is. But how could we use reverse division? What's the opposite of division? I didn't teach you how to divide a polynomial by a binomial, but I do know that if this divided by this equals that, then doesn't this times this have to equal that? Well, let's do it in a simpler term. What if I had 100 divided by 2? We know that that equals 50. It equals 50 because 50 times 2 gives me 100. So they're asking, does this thing, when you divide it, equal this? How could you check it? They're asking, does it make sense, and justify it. So all you have to do is show that this times this equals that, just as 50 times 2 gives me 100. You may use the box method, or you may double distribute. So some of you may want to just take 2x plus 5 and multiply it by x squared plus 5x plus 1 by double distributing. So distribute the 2x into everything and the 5x into everything and combine like terms. If after you do that, you get 2x to the third plus 15x squared plus 27x plus 5, you know that it makes sense. I'm personally going to do the box method because I think that's a little bit easier. So the way we set it up is the same way as we did before. I'm going to put 2x here, 5 here, x squared, 5x, and 1. All right, please pause the video and choose whichever method you'd like to use. Okay, here are your answers. Okay, it looks like it checks out either way. So where it says justify your answer, it's enough that you have work here. So you should just write down in words, yes, because x squared plus 5x plus 1, parentheses, meaning times, 2x plus 5 equals 2x to the third plus 15x squared plus 27x plus 5. That would be enough. Okay, I'd like you to try example number 2 on your own for homework, and we will go over that in class. Make sure you do model it the same way. All right, last but not least, we're going to talk about the link to factoring because that's the unit we're going to next. So they want you to fill in the missing portion of each product so the equation is an identity, meaning the equation is true. So basically I want to take 8x squared minus 2x and write it as a distributing problem. So basically 4x times what is going to give me 8x, and 4x times what over here is going to give me negative 12. So we're basically reversing division by multiplying. So we've got 4x times what? Well, let's see. 4 times what gives me 8? Should be saying 2. So 4 times 2 gives me 8. Now let's talk about the x. X times what gives me x squared? So x, so 2x. All right, now let's talk about this 4 again. 4 times what gives me 12, or negative 12? You should be saying negative 3. Then x times what gives me x? X times 1. So 3 times 1 is just 3. We leave it. There is an easier way to do it. Isn't 4x times this equal that, right? So couldn't we just take this and divide it by that, right? So, like, for example, if I had that same example we did before, 50 times 2 gives me 100. So this is how it's set up here. So if I have the 50, but I don't have the 2, like, obviously you know that 50 times 2 is 100, but can't I just do 100 divided by 50 to get 2? So to get this inside parenthesis, you're going to take this guy and divide it by that guy. So we're just going to take this whole thing here in example B and divide it by 7x squared. So you should get x squared minus 3x minus 4. How could you check to see if your answer is correct? You should be saying, if I distribute this out, I better get that. All right, take a minute and try example C. Okay, here's what your answer should be. Okay, the last one's a little bit tricky. We want to divide this whole thing, well, not all this piece. We're going to divide this whole thing by x minus 2. It looks tricky, but it's actually easy. Look, these will cancel when you divide those two, so you'll be left with 4x squared. These two will cancel when you divide those two, so you'll be left with 4x minus 9. So can somebody explain the connection between what I just did here and factoring? So that's what I want you to try to do for homework. Try to write something down for that. I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with GCF. All right, so your homework is going to be this one and number 2. Okay? Good luck. See you tomorrow.